Okay, folks, happy whatever heck this is. Thursday evening. It's nearly Friday. Get a little bit more air going, and we'll pick up where we left off yesterday, which is painting this Byzantine cavalry dude. And let's make sure this is zoomed all the way out, because you're not going to be able to see diddly anything if it looked like it was too zoomed in. Alright, let's see if we got any mold growth on this yet. No, doesn't smell like it. Let's check the corners. Nothing on the penny. Nothing on the penny there. Oh, so far so good. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more water on this still. I'll be right back. Alright. We should be able to hit the ground running. And we'll see if anybody shows up tonight. It's a little later start than I would have wanted, but it's better than not coming on here. So. Okay, I think we needed to do lance next, and we've been doing buff on that, so let's go ahead and buff out the lance, so to speak. Here we go. Too wet there. like the summer lighting so much better than the non-summer lighting. They got lots of daylight. However, you get home at a time when it's kind of late and it doesn't feel like it. So it's just you're just fooling yourself. Ah, yes, the magic drippings. Can't forget about that. So my goal, short goal, is to get this guy done tonight. I think that's reasonable. It involves doing one shield and a couple of detailed things, and I think it's definitely doable. So... and that means we'll have one more guy to do, and then this stand will be done. And I may, at some later point, actually put little pennons on these guys. Little pennants. But I don't want to get bogged down with doing that on here. Well, it might be something I do after the army's completely done. We'll just have to see. Got mixed feelings on them. I've done them on certain armies and I liked how they turned out. I've not done it on other armies and been fine with it. Hello, Tony. There you are, back again. So for some more Alexander trash talking. I gotta tell Mitch about that. I think that's actually a good thing to try to do, you know, Hannibal versus Persia. And then, which actually looks like it would actually be an interesting battle. I don't know that Alexander versus Rome is that interesting, only because the Romans are kind of like, you know, have two different troop types. But we talked about doing that, you know, Alexander if he kept on going, which is, you know, if he hadn't died. And I'm kind of the opinion, I like the scenario that he doesn't die of natural causes. I like the scenario that he gets poisoned. That Antipater sends Cassander down and to poison him. We'll never know. We'll never know what happens, but I like the idea that Antipater decides to poison Alexander because Alexander's become too Eastern in his ways. Did some painting today. You painted 4 Panzer Is in 6 mil. The tank with no tank gun, machine guns. He used a few of them in North Africa, but it's kind of hard to find a TO and E with them in there. But they were kind of in reconnaissance battalion type stuff. The recon company, the recon platoon, and the Panzer battalion. So anyway, so I like the idea. I like the idea that Alexander gets poisoned by his own people for becoming too Eastern in his ways. But we'll probably never know. Because I'm all for Alexander going and paying the Persians back. I'm all for that. You know, like, you mess with the Greeks too long, here's your payback. But then the payback is, you know, you don't turn into the same people that you didn't want them to be. You know, I mean, if you wanted to be so Persian and everything, then you should have just fallen under their spell. Trying to figure out what I will use these M4A4 Shermans for. Are they really M4A4s? Because remember, only the Commonwealth used A4s. The U.S. didn't use A4s. I mean, they may have been exceptions, but generally, the Commonwealth used A1s. A2, which was the first ones they got in the desert. The cast iron ones. And then which are kind of ugly, but you know, Shermans are all kind of unattractive looking, but I think they in the unattractiveness that they can have some personality because you can, like, you know, add all kinds of different equipment and make them all individual, you know, give them nicknames and stuff like that. I particularly like the British Shermans in the desert because they have that nice, the light color and the dark, and it's like that swoosh pattern like they used at Alamein and stuff. But the Brits used the A1s. The A2s were used by the Marines. The A3s was used by the Americans only. And the A4s were Commonwealth. So like the Poles and the Brits and stuff used them. I don't know what the hell the 5s are. They might have been something else, but the Brits and the Marines used the diesel version Shermans because they had access to that's how their fuel was. So they didn't add another wrench in the equation. And I guess the A2s would have been used by the Russians. And the Russians really liked the Sherman. The one they really liked was the Valentine. Go figure. Talk about a low profile. You think he was poisoned because of jealousy among his top commanders? They wanted to stop, but he didn't. Either that or his mother did him in because he left her in obscurity back in Macedon. Everything I've read about her, Olympias, and she was many things, but I'm pretty sure she was pretty loyal to Alexander. I've read a few things about her, and she was definitely a colorful character. She was definitely a loose cannon, but I don't think she did anything that was anti-Alexander. Because when he died, he was... she was definitely protecting Roxanne and his son, Alexander IV. So, but she definitely wanted to have some kind of a role. I don't think she didn't get along with Antipater. She kind of had kind of a blood feud with him. So I don't know if I think it would be very strange that both people on opposite sides of the blood feud both wanted to poison Alexander, but I guess it's possible. I don't think that that's the tack I would go with, but and you could say, well, he had liver failure or whatever the hell it was, but why didn't the other people he was with have liver failure too? Because they partied with him as much. How many wives did he end up having? I don't know. Was it a Macedonian thing you could have more than one wife? I think it was too. Like, how many wives do you need? One's a plenty, right? Can't rule out anyone. It's true. We'll never know. I think the Egyptians have found his lost tomb in Cairo. What, today? I don't know. It could be underwater. Would be the wrong place for his tomb. Absolutely. It's got to either be in Memphis or it's got to be in Alexandria. I don't think it made it out to that Siwa place he wanted to be buried. That's where he wanted. Perdiccas wanted to send him back to the royal tombs in Macedon, where his dad was buried. Alexander wanted to be buried over there with the hippies out in the frickin' at Siwa, which is literally in the middle of nowhere. And Ptolemy intercepted it, held it in Memphis, and then supposedly, what is I reading something like Julius Caesar, when he went to Egypt, visited his tomb? Well, somebody wrote that. I mean, who knows if that really happened, but it would be pretty cool if they freaking found that. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of things that I hope that happen in my lifetime. That's one of them. The other one is open up that pyramid that the first emperor of China has. Just got and see what kind of shit's in there. See if there are those rivers of lead and rivers of mercury. Put that to rest. But who knows? I mean, a lot of these things, no new information has come out for hundreds of years. And it's not like dinosaurs. For instance, dinosaurs, all kinds of new shit comes out on dinosaurs. Well, dinosaurs are relatively new. They didn't start finding them until the 1800s. So, I mean, I guess they found them before and thought there was something else. But they're dragons. That'll be dragons. But his tomb is in Alexandria. The question is where in Alexandria is it? It could be underwater. Philip married a new wife at the start of each campaign. He used marriage to solidify alliances before the war. They found a lot of Macedonian artifacts and underground excavation in Cairo. Yeah, and Cairo, without me knowing, without them consulting me, has just exploded in population. I mean, like, insane. I was looking on something else and it was like, most populous city is in Cairo is all the way up there. I'm like, when the hell did that happen? I mean, there's always a lot of people in Cairo, but since the 80s, it's just exploded. That's not how you find things. Overpopulating something is not how you're going to find artifacts. But, yeah, some stuff we're just never going to know. But, if he found his body, maybe there's a chance you could find out, if he has traces. I mean, it's traces of something in there. They'd be like, oh, okay, it is a poison. So we need to do that. We need to do Hannibal versus the Achaemenid Persians, and we need to do Alexander versus Rome. Just for yucks. I would much rather have Alexander's army than all those damn Gallic warband. You can't count on them for shit. Expect a lot of things have been moved over time. Dead Sea Scrolls are another enigma. Hannibal versus a shotgun would be a good fight. I don't know where you're going with that. I mean, Hannibal and Alexander aren't that far out of place. I mean, it's only 120 years, you know? That's nothing. That's nothing. The shotgun would blast Hannibal too. Honestly, I have no respect for Hannibal as a general. Ha. Well, that's not very fair. You don't have to have respect for him, but he did survive in the freaking wilderness in the backyard of Rome for 15 freaking years. That accounts for something. And I don't like the Carthaginians. You know, I'm not one of those people that's like, stick it to the Romans. They deserved it. I am not pro-Carthaginian, but I think it takes something to stay supplied for 15 years in somebody's backyard. And Hannibal didn't win every battle. He just won the ones he heard about. But he lost plenty of other ones. There's a couple of people that stumped him. Marcellus stumped him a few times until he got ambushed. And then he didn't stump him no more because he was ambushed. You can say, well, Alexander never lost any battles. Yeah, he did. He might not have lost the campaign, but he got repulsed taking some cities and stuff like that. Those people in the Afghanistan drove him freaking mad. It drove him so mad he had to go take an Afghani wife. Accounts for ineptitude on behalf of the Roman commanders. Well, how inept were the Persians? The Persians were a lot more inept than the Roman commanders. You have zero respect for Russian generals. Oh, the ones now or the World War II ones? I don't think we're going to know what's happening right now ever. I think the information isn't there, or we're all being fed a bunch of lies. So I just don't even pay attention to it. Yeah, the problem with the Persians is they're their own undoing. And I don't know if it's intrinsic to that part of the world, but it was customary for the Achaemenids and for the Sassanids that came later, and also the Turks. So I don't know if it's that part of the world that creates it, but you got some guy in charge, he has multiple sons, and he goes and dies, and the sons can't handle sharing power. It's all or nothing. So they have a civil war. One guy takes. I mean, there's exceptions to it, but generally there's a civil war. One guy comes out top and murders the rest of his freaking family. So, they may be really strong, but then the leader dies. There's a civil war, and they weaken their own country through civil wars. And then you gotta have to have kids with somebody in the harem, and then you have multiple kids, and it's brought upon yourself, which is honestly pretty stupid, because if you think about it, you have enemies that are trying to do yourself in. You shouldn't be done in by your own people. That's what your enemies are for. But you could say places like Rome would have similar problems, but that's all politics driven. You know. Russian generals that came around after the Napoleonic Wars. Okay. I know World War One Russian generals they made all kinds of mistakes. They made all kinds of mistakes. All right. Did we end up nulling these guys last night? I don't think we did. Null to the oil. All right, let's go ahead and do that so that can settle a little bit. Spencer Wright, welcome. Georgy Zukov was very capable. As long as he doesn't grab an AK and yells "Oi!" God, I hated that movie. And I like Jason Isaacs. I'm just like, you should make an attempt to make a Russian accent, dude. I did not like that movie at all. And everybody I knew that told me about it loved it. I hated that movie. A couple of the characters had Stalin had like a Cockney accent or some other extremely odd accent. It was trash. Lots of people liked it. No thanks. Zukov had numbers, and that's all he had. He was just as inept as the Russian general staff. Uh-oh. In this corner, we have... I don't know. We used to do a lot of Russian front stuff. I love the Russian front, because, which bad guy you want to be. But, and I hate to sound like one of those people, but I'm more sympathetic to the Germans only because they think more Western than the Russian way. But, they're both rat bastards, all of them. And I think that's why most war gamers, at least the war gamers that I play with, definitely are more inclined to want to play German. That and I think as war gamers we want to play the underdog to see if we can do something better. But But with that said, I do like playing World War One Russians. They're a lot of fun. I mean World War Two Russians, not World War One Russians. Those guys would be no fun. World War Two Russians are a lot of fun, and that's my favorite World War Two thing is Barbarossa, and especially when you get into like 42, 43, things are a little bit more balanced there with troop qualities and stuff. All right, let's do the thing that his sheath goes in. You love playing Soviets. If your guys get wiped out, you don't care. I used to care a little bit, but that's where the war was won or lost. And it's funny, even though I like the Eastern Front, Stalingrad has just never interested me. Never. It's just, it's house to house fighting for the most part. So, you're going to have a lack of combined arms all the time. Now, the Panzers are gray, so I'm a fan of that. I'd rather paint gray Panzers than the armored dark yellow ones, but. It's all good. The Stalingrad just never interested me. It's too little too block to block fighting. Unless you're playing something like Advanced Squad Leader or whatever. Those games are fun. They kept making the same mistakes again and again and again. Yeah. I tell you what, if I got into World War II again, there's a lot of new stuff to read from the Russian archives. Because when I was into it, that stuff wasn't open. And I'm not saying that there's truth in there, but the stuff the Germans wrote is obviously skewed to make themselves look better. And, the Germans were kind of our allies in the Cold War, and, so it's like at least you can compare their lies and the Soviet lies and at least, cross-reference some stuff, like, Julius Caesar's campaign in Gaul, right? I mean, if you had some written stuff from the Gauls, you could at least compare and contrast and see the truth is somewhere in the middle, not just you're being fed like one propaganda from one side, and it's always good to look at things from more than one source because there might be an agenda that something was written the way it was. Will Robinson, no one writes memoirs titled How I Contributed to Us Losing World War II. Well, not yet. Give it time. I don't know. I'd probably read it and be like, I wonder what's in here. It sounds like a different angle. How I cost us the war. How I deserve the firing squad.
Managed to unravel many more great strategies. Hitler kept ignoring their advice.
Well, I don't really care for reading things that are too strategic. I'm just not interested in that. I'm not interested in ever wargaming that aspect of it. So, something that is along the lines of, say, a game like one of my least favorite games I've ever played, Rise and Decline of the Third Reich by Avalon Hill. Avalon Hill, I hate that game. Burps and derps and lerps, and it's not pretty to look at, etc. It's got all the things that it's missing all the stuff that I like in a war game. But regardless, I don't really care for that type of playing those type of usually people are into either strategy or tactics. Most people, most war gamers, or at least most computer war gamers, tend to skew from what I have listened to, tend to be more strategic. I'm not. I'm a tactics guy. And strategy is just a little too political for my taste. But I've had there's some guys, couple guys that have some shows on YouTube, and they make some interesting points that, they make Hitler seem crazier than he was. And I'm always been the proponent of the Hitler's a lunatic thing. And I think the German general staff just kind of went along with it because they wanted payback for getting screwed out of the First World War. But maybe that's not true. But I've seen a couple programs that said that it was all about oil, and I mean, sure, oil was a big thing, but it's basically that Hitler was right that they should have ignored Moscow and gone south. I don't know. Who knows? The right move would have been to show up to Russia as liberators, not frickin' round everybody up. Anybody could tell that was the solution, but they didn't do that, which I guess is probably a good thing because you don't really want the Germans to. You really don't want the Germans to win the Second World War. That would be bad. That would be bad. Zhukov engineered the defensive Stalin in Moscow. He was architect of Operation Bagration. I had a game on that, and it was like, this is bad. This is just not going to be a lot of fun this is just a spanking. I'd play that like in a computer game or something like that. It takes really to divert the panzers when they're less than 100 miles from Moscow. Architect of slaughter, no regard for effect. Or ignore the fact that Germany had practically no oil. The only strategic type game that I like, that I can think of, well, there's many that are kind of strategic. I guess they're operational or whatever. Is I used to play the V for Victory games. Those handled supply really cool back in the 90s. And they handled that really, really well. At least I thought they handled it really, really well. And then the Shenandoah Studio games, which there's one that's called Battle of the Bulge. I wonder what that one's about. And they do, it's like Drive on Moscow or something on Moscow. So they do those two. And the stacking limit is 3 divisions and their area movement. And I think that they're really brilliant from the standpoint of you can make strategic choices and they aren't like too bogged down. They're kind of light war games, but they look good. I think they look really good. So there are minutes from German staff meetings where you ask, how much oil will this cost constantly? Yeah. Well, it's a good thing they didn't win. But It's all we used to game for the longest time. It's like it's fascinating. Except the Pacific. I can't get into the Pacific. I just can't get into the Pacific at all. Oh well. Let's see. If there had only been a Pacific War, would I be into World War II at all? Probably not. Quiz us. Oh, we don't want to go that. You don't want me to do that. I got to get these guys painted. There was a German TV advert recently on TV that was pulled. It said all the way from Berlin to Moscow on one tank. They were promoting fuel efficiency, but tongue in cheek. Nope, didn't see that. I don't even watch the adverts here. You'd have to watch television to see an advert, and I don't really watch that. So just like you don't like, well, that's not fair. Yeah, maybe it is. Just like you don't like Hannibal, and I don't like the Carthaginians. I don't like the Mongols. I don't like the Mongols at all. I'll still play them. I'll play anybody, you know. And I'll probably at some point build them. I just do not like the Mongol. I don't like people that just destroy shit, you know, that destroy knowledge. I'm, you know, you don't buy the Adolf Hitler was an idiot argument. Evil, yes, not the best military mind, but some of the Allied leaders were not exactly a second coming of Napoleon. Well, that's true. That's very true. I think he was luckier than everything else. I was watching a show. I was watching a YouTube show this last week. I think it was this last week. And it was some of the, I don't think it had a quantified on how many, but it said the worst military generals ever. Okay? So not the best ones, but the worst ones. And on there, let me think who they had on there. People I'd never heard of before. One of them was some guy in the Civil War. I'd never heard of him. You know, he wasn't top guy or whatever. And then they had Haig as the British one. You know, I'm not big into the World War One. Obviously, I'd heard of Haig and how he sacrificed people, supposedly, on offensives. And I was expecting them, all right, we got to have some World War II people on there. And they didn't. At least in this program, they didn't. But they did have Ludendorff. And I'm like, what? Why Ludendorff? I mean, he was one of the good ones. Him and Hindenburg that stopped the Russians. And it mentioned all that. But basically, he said that after the war, he basically blamed everything on he basically blamed everything on the Jews and caused, you know, the Hitler to come up and all the stuff that happened in World War II to happen. So that was an interesting take. I was expecting him to say, you know, actually decisions in battle, and so that was at least this one person's opinion on who the worst one was. But I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess if you make that connection, of course, I would argue, let the Germans win the First World War, and you don't have that problem. No, it wasn't Burnside. It was like a low-level commander. It was a guy. Let me think. Was it a Confederate guy? I think it was a Confederate guy, and it was a guy that basically let himself, he was defending like Vicksburg or something like that, and he basically did something stupid and he let the Union cut the Confederacy in two. So it was kind of like a middle management guy. No, it wasn't Bragg. It had some pretty low players. I mean, it was folks that, I mean, I heard of Haig. The earlier guys, I'd never even heard of them before. But, you know, I'm not big into 18th century stuff. 18th century stuff, 19th century stuff. So there was nobody from Napoleonic period there. And it was just short. It was like 6 or 7 different people. So I guess it was kind of unique that they had a unique take than what you normally would, you know, what you normally would consider, you know. I'm going to go grab me a soda. I'll be right back. Da-da-da-da-da. Pemberton was a Vicksburg. I wonder who it is. I'll have to find out what it was. A few thousand miniatures left to finish. You better believe it. I don't think that. Not a Civil War guy, okay? I don't think that I've ever heard that Grant wasn't good. But, you know, I'm never going to be into the Civil War. Pretty sure I'm never going to be into the Civil War. Even though my hero made 15 millimeter figures for American Civil War, including his general set, which is freaking awesome. Because it even, if you go on there, go on, it's on 19th century miniatures, right? If you're into 15 millimeter American Civil War, go to 19th century miniatures, who are the folks in Michigan who have the molds for Old Glory's 15 millimeter stuff, and they make American Civil War stuff, and they have a set of generals. They have them. They have four sets. They have Eastern and Western, Confederate and Union, and it's individual people, and they're Old Glory, so they have like a little tab between the legs where they sit on the horse, and it'll be etched on there. Lee, Custer, whoever it is, and you look at the figures that this guy sculpted, and they look just like pictures you've seen of Stonewall Jackson or whatever. It's amazing. It's almost makes, but I just don't like American Civil War at all. I don't like the time period, and I don't like the fact that there's only two sides, and they're both Americans, and I'm already American, so yippee. But that stuff is amazing. Amazing stuff. Grant was the best general of the American Civil War. I don't know about that. I don't know. Sure, why not? I don't know. It does not interest me in the least bit. I would rather do Crimean War than American Civil War. I'd rather do Mexican-American War. Well, if I had to do a conflict in the Americas that wasn't like conquistadors versus Aztecs, that's a lot. That's painting a lot of freaking Aztecs and Tlaxcalans and everything else. But if I was going to do something American, meaning like North American, it would have to be either French and Indian War or AWI, because then at least you've got multiple sides on it and stuff like that.
There were Irish elements that fought in the American Civil War.
There may have been, but they're still Union. I don't think there was any Irish that fought for the Confederacy. I have above average knowledge of the American Civil War for people off the street, not for war gamers. I would be like, and I've encountered some people that are like, "Oh, you're really into World War II. Let's talk about World War II." And these people don't know anything. They don't know about what the front armor on a Panzer III-H is. How many millimeters armor it has on it. That's not wargaming info. They have general kind of stuff. We have very specific sets of knowledge things. You always want to get the Mexican-American War. Yeah, it seems like it'd be really one-sided, but Union Irish Brigade was made up of Irish from Ireland, and at Fredericksburg they attacked the position on the heights defended by Cobb's Georgian Irish Regiment. Interesting. I've been to the Fredericksburg battlefield. We went there the last time we went to Historicon, went there. The year before that, we stopped and did Gettysburg, and then we went to Fredericksburg last time because we had to hit something on the way, and Pemberton. I don't think it was. I'll have to post who it is. Anyways, this guy picked really obscure people that were crappy generals, in this person's opinion. All right. What do we got left? We got to do the shield. We got to do the saddlecloth. Let's go ahead and jump on the shield. Is that like jumping on a sword? No. It's nothing like that.
You had aided French and British armies for AWI. Little known fact, the famous 69th Pennsylvania that defended the center of the stone wall at Gettysburg were made up of Irish volunteers who wanted to start their own Irish brigade. Used to do reenactment in a British light infantry company. You did a lot of the games AWI without any Americans.
I'd want to do French just so you could do silly accents. That's the whole point of wargaming for me, to do silly accents. Not all the time, when it's appropriate. You know, when silly things happen. There's a Civil War battle fought in Arizona? They reenact it every year. Yeah, it was that battle from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, right? I never finished watching that movie. I started watching it like 3 years ago. I'd never seen it. I'm not a Westerns fan, you know. And I started seeing it. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't get around to seeing like the last 15, 20 minutes. Something happened. I got distracted or something. I would do 7 years before Napoleonics. Everybody does Napoleonic. Well, I wouldn't do any of them. I don't have time to paint. I can't be into everything. Wise man once said, I can't be into everything. Oh shit, I just assumed your gender. Yep, I do that all the time. I'm not apologizing for it. Been to Glorieta Pass, the furthest western ACW battlefield north of Santa Fe. The French army is very good in America, but their navy was the biggest problem for the British. Well, and the king paid for it with his head. He was decapitated, right? What would that be? Louis the 16th? I really should get royalties each time I use that quote. I am indeed a male. You identify as a male. Royalties. That's bullshit. That sounds like you're trying to lawyer something in there. You can get no money. If you mention something on my channel, I should get royalties for that. No, I don't roll like that. Screw that crap. Royalties. Sounds like you got to sign some piece of paper that neither one of us would understand what the hell's written on it. All right, let's get the blue. Let's do the blue. What do you got? Just the shield to do, and the horsehair, and the we can do that. Shields are fun. Shield's the most fun part. Well, we may never agree who's better, Alexander or Hannibal, but we can agree that Caligula was the worst Roman emperor.
That guy sucked. That the last miniature for the stand. No, I need one more. But if I get this guy done, then I'm behind one figure a day. So that's reasonable. I knew I was going to fall behind, so. You identify as the Emperor of the Universe every day. Bow before my glory. Elagabalus. I remember him, but he can't be worse than. They didn't make a movie about him, so I can only comment on Caligula. Elagabalus. That sounds like Alcibiades. Battle of Pikachu Peak, farther west. Oh. Sounds like someplace Marty would go to look for Pokemon. Pikachu Peak. Elagabalus. Oh, there's some real bad folks on there. And we're just talking the Western Romans. I'm not talking about the Byzantines. Who's that Praetorian guy that took over and made a mess of things? Pertinax? He made a mess of things. Pikachu. Damn spell check. Pikachu, muchacho. I like my Romans with no emperors. I think of my Romans as Republic Romans. That might be because I've never painted any impy armies. All right. Go ahead and bring this up a little bit. You could do orange again. Matthias Corvinus. Was he in my Hungarian army? Yes, he was. Yep, he's my first head swap ever. Yep. And I wanted to do Janos Hunyadi as well, but there can only be one. So, yeah, I got Matthias Corvinus. Matthias Hunyadi / Matthias Corvinus. Yep. He's actually the one that ended up locking up Dracula. Kind of screwed Dracula. All right. Let's do orange part here. Go a little bit brighter than that.
here goes everything. 1 up. 2 over, 1 up.
You seem to be a very savvy guy. He's kind of a Renaissance guy.
Kind of a Renaissance guy. He was collecting books and shit like that. Had a big library. But he's one of those guys that when he passed on, his lands went to shit. So his lands went to shit when he passed on. That happens a lot, you know. Happens to everybody from Alexander. Maybe not Alexander's correctly because they split up, but you know, a lot of his stuff lasted a while. But Tamerlane, everything went to shit after he went down. He came out of nowhere and freaking conquered a shitload of stuff in just a matter of years. And then he passed on, and 10 years after his death, it's just all crumbles. Everything being held together by the cult of personality of one guy. Same thing with Attila. Attila passes on, and the Huns are just kind of like, "What do you want to do? Then I don't know. Let's see if the Byzantines will hire us." Oh, look, they will. So there's probably countless other examples. Tony, were M4A4s used during Normandy and Market Garden? I can't remember off the top of my head. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that the standard Sherman in the Commonwealth armies was M4A4s in Normandy and Market Garden. You know, they had some Fireflies mixed in. At the beginning, they had the Firefly 1s. And then later they had the, you know, which are they're not as good looking as the later ones. But and there may have been some other Sherman variants that the Commonwealth used, but M4A4 was basically the standard one. Now remember, you got 7th Armored Division and Desert Rats. When they show up, they were equipped with Cromwells, not Shermans, and obviously, you know, the the tank brigades all had, you know, Churchills of different stuff. So the Cromwells weren't in every single British armored division. They definitely were in the 7th. I'd have to go in there and, you know, and dig and find out, you know, what they had. When did they introduce the Black Prince? Pretty sure it's post-war. That's a variant. Cromwells were good tanks. You like the look of them. I don't care for them. I think they're too low, which I guess makes them better. But you know, the thing is that the Cromwells didn't have any fireflies with them, and sometimes the Cromwells were used in a Reese roll because they were faster. And that's a hell of a thing. Put a 75 millimeter vehicle in a reconnaissance, you know, in a reconnaissance unit. You can counter anything, and it's, you know, bye. M4A1 75 millimeter were used in Africa. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. They started getting them. Well, they had them in El Alamein. I don't know if they had them at Gazala. I want to say that they didn't. I want to say they didn't start getting them until Alamein. Because Alamein is really interesting. Well, I'm not interested in Alamein because it's basically like almost like a World War I battle with all the damn minefields. But, you know, other than there's counterattacks and stuff like that. But that has a really interesting variety of vehicles because, you know, the British have, you know, Valentines and Grants and the Shermans and Crusaders and you know, the Germans have all the 2s, 3s, and 4s. And some of the 4s were just getting there that had the 4 F2s with the bulbous smoke. What do you call it? The suppressing thing on the end. Can't remember. See, I stopped talking about stuff for 20 years. I don't remember what it's called, but they had a few of those that showed up down there. M4A1s and 5 M4A4s. I don't think you can use them together. Penta M4A1s for North Africa, M4A4s for Northwest Europe. Just make sure that the African ones you use are 70. Thank you. Muzzle brake. I will paint the M4. Just make sure the M4A1s you have do not have a 76 millimeter gun. The 76 millimeter gun Shermans did not make it to Africa. These crocodiles as well. Yeah, those things are nasty. Aim for the little armored trailer. Yeah, the Churchill has really good stats in a war game, but I have a feeling it had a hell of a lot of blind spots because the whole side of the hull is just like a freaking wall. Probably really good if you infantry operating with them because you got lots of guys you could hang behind. You know, you could use them for a lot of guys could hide behind one because of their length. But there's an episode on the Chieftain. The Chieftain and Lindy Beige go to and climb in a turret of a Churchill, and it's just hilarious to how tight it is. I think Lindy Beige is really amusing. I like his videos a lot. He has a lot of energy. He needs a comb, but he has a lot of energy. He would be fun at parties, I think. I don't think the Chieftain would be fun at parties, but doesn't look like there's a difference in the guns. But then again, these are 6 mil. You would know. The 76 millimeter gun protrudes out past the hull quite a bit, and the 75 is either even or doesn't protrude much at all. I could look it up in an awesome reference I have, but I really need to get these guys done. But I think if you do that, you're pretty safe. think if you do that, you're pretty safe. Yeah, the British sermons in Africa are, in my opinion, the best looking ones because of the camo, you know, and the Commonwealth symbols that they have on the fenders. I really like well, sometimes they're on the fender, sometimes they're just inside the fender. Those are really nice looking as well. But, you know, again, I'm looking at stuff from the standpoint of a modeler. Guys in battle don't give a shit about that stuff. They want to make sure they don't break down, etc. I happen to like Crusaders a lot. I love how Crusaders look. Doesn't matter that they were unreliable. I don't care. I'm building them as models. I don't care about that realistic stuff. Don't talk to me about realism. I'm just modeling stuff. Did I know Arizona Indians used gold bullets at one time because they didn't have lead? Huh. How'd they get bullets? I'm always floored how, you know, they would sell weapons to people that they ended up fighting. I'm like, you know, I wouldn't do that, but I guess some people didn't care. Hey, you know, we wouldn't get all shot to shit if these guys went and sell them guns. Oops. Gold bullets. Shoot me. Shoot me again. I played one Western game at a convention. And it was a hoot. It was like 2005 or 2006. And what was really cool about this game was that you controlled two forces. And your forces were only like, you know, 6 or 7 figures or 4 to 7 figures, something like that. And this board that we all played at was, I don't know, maybe 8 foot by 14 or something like that. It was really big, and like over 10 people were playing this, and everybody had 2 different forces, and they were on 2 different parts of the map. So if like your board is like this, and you have some guys that come in the board here and other guys that don't come in until like all the way across the entire board. So you weren't relegated to being stuck in one part of the board, but you know, there were like 2 basically different objectives, you know, they had. So like, for instance, my particular force ended up being Geronimo, that was coming on the board, and he needed to get off the opposite side of the board. You know, if he didn't encounter anybody, that's fine. I just needed to get my people off the board. And my people meant it was just like, you know, 5 or 6 people. And then my other force was I think like 4 or 5 Mexican banditos on horseback, and they had to go rob a bank. And you know, you're far away from your own guys that you can't get your 2 forces to really cooperate with each other. And it was a hoot, despite it being Western and despite it being 28 mil. It was a lot of fun. I have fond memories of that game. Back when our show was in Tampa. Early to mid 2000s.
Played a game once that was based on Westworld. It was a good laugh. I really liked season 1 of Westworld. It made you think. And I tried to watch season 2 and couldn't get into it. But I didn't know there was an old show or an old movie on it. No clue. But, you know, the HBO series, I thought it was pretty entertaining. Gotta go pick up the wife. All right. See you later, Will. Thanks for stopping by again. See you tomorrow night. The only problem with using different manufacturers is shields, the bosses are totally different sizes. So like the Old Glory ones are much narrower boss than the two-layer ones. But yeah, it is what it is. It's not a big deal. You know, they're not all made in the same factory. Oh, this is a watery grave. If I was just collecting and painting miniatures and we're not playing any games with them, what size bases would I use to base the miniatures? If I was doing 15s, I'd base them on pennies and just leave them there. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I wish this game was all pennies, because then I could just paint guys individually. I feel like painting 3 Normans. So you paint them and you don't have to be part of anything else. And then you go on and paint some other thing. You know, you could paint them in whatever order you wanted to. You wouldn't be like, all right, I need to order, you know, you wouldn't have to worry about getting all your figures in time before you started a project, so you could do the right mix. You could just, you know, paint all the Old Glory figures, you know, and then take other ones and add to it, you know. But I'd put them on pennies, you know. They're cheap. I think just the right size. No doubt about it. If I'm going to paint guys individually, I want them on round bases, not square. I find it weird to have one figure on a square base. I know other people have probably done it for years, but it just seems weird to me. But it was a skirmish game that took part at Falkirk. Audience participation, game given a dice. Ask what you want to do with it. Was like a D&D game. Yeah, narrative driven. Yeah, that's what you'll remember. You remember, oh, I remember the one time you did that. Those are some of the more memorable games. I have a game that the same person ran this Western one. He was always doing narrative-driven games, and he played this Pig War scenario that was in with El Cid. And he goes to me and he says, "I got a character I want you to play." Because he knew I was into the Spanish and stuff like that. I think at the time just finished a feudal Spanish army. And I'm like, all right. So I get handed this character, and he's the standard. He is basically the lieutenant for El Cid. El Cid is his master, whatever. Anyway. So his background story is that he was falsely imprisoned. His whole point in the game is to get revenge for his master being falsely imprisoned by this Spanish guy who happens to be the CNC for our side in this battle. So, we got like 12 players or maybe 14 players, like 6 or 7 on each side. And it's basically Almoravids versus the Spanish. And so, my whole point is to get revenge for El Cid. That's all I have to do. So I waited until basically the end of the battle where the Spanish general ends up getting mixed up in this combat, and I charge him from the rear and kill him. And the guy was so upset, and I'm like, he was so upset that I did that, but that's what I had to do. That's what my character was supposed to do. I don't naturally like to backstab people unless that's the only way to win. And in this case, that's the character that I have to play. So when you get handed, a character, I want to play him as he should be played, and this guy was so upset, I hadn't seen him since. He got so upset because he'd won the battle. His mission was like, take over the town or whatever the hell it was. And I charged into him when he just won the combat, and he gets reamed in the rear and dies in battle. And he was upset about it. It's just a freaking game. I don't like to backstab people, but that's what my character was supposed to do. So hadn't seen that guy since at any of his shows. Decent group of friends. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to come by. Lots of folks have a lot of problems with that. I fortunately don't. Yeah, the little symbols on here are going to be narrower than the other one because the problem is that the boss is a lot narrower. So you can't have the symbol going out past the side of the boss, and the boss is like this size as opposed to this one. So on this one, the thing's going to come out a lot farther than this one. So it's just going to be one of those things they're not perfectly the same on the shield, but hell, they're not made in the same factory, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Just hang on here, Nordic, and we'll take a look at those Sherman things as soon as I'm done with this guy. I just don't want to get sidetracked and not finish him because we're kind of in crunch mode. We'll pull out one of my anal retentive books. Yep, a little bit more, even a little bit more than that. And, people always say, oh, Shermans aren't very good. Well, in North Africa they are. Friggin' North Africa, they're awesome. They're a much better tank than the Mark IVs. Don't break down as much. They have a high profile, but their 75 millimeter gun is just perfectly, unless you encounter those handful of, Tiger 1s they had in Tunisia, this pretty much can go through anything else that the Germans have. Yeah, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit of white here. Right. What do we got? Saddlecloth. What do we do? It's almost like pinkish on this one, I think. Yeah, we can do that. And we have stripes on that one? I think we do. All right, let's... The other thing that'd be pretty cool to do is if you did Shermans in North Africa, you could do the U.S. forces, because they had funky things like, you know, they had those tank destroyers that were based on the M3 half track, and it had a, you know, they were open top, so they had some of those, and they had a lot of their markings were in yellow instead of white. That's kind of unique. You know, plus they had, you know, Lees. These are interesting looking. Italy is kind of the forgotten front in World War II land. I think only once I've seen somebody do something in Italy. And there's honestly really no reason for it other than you just don't think about that theater, but you know, there's good terrain opportunity. The Grant's one of my favorite tanks just from the odd look of them. Yeah, they do look odd. They do look strange. All right. This is a black horse, so you know the mane and tail's got to be black too. Well, it doesn't have to be, but this one will be. Yeah, it's 10:30. I need to call it. We're damn near done. I'm cutting that one short. All right, let's take a look at that book. Book in question. Still Germans in Italy, absolutely.
were still holding ground in Italy. Well, it's good catch-22. They didn't put their best forces down there, and the Allies didn't either. So, all right, this is going to be a problem if I leave that where it is. The book in question. British and American Tanks of World War II, Peter Chamberlain and Chris Ellis. All right, so we're looking for Shermans. Let's go to Shermans. You'd think I'd just be able to find it quickly. Australian variants, yeah, heavy tank, M6, medium T26, right. Sherman. Holy crap, there's a lot of different variants. What are you looking for again? Oh, man. All right, here we go. The M4 pilot model was built by Lima Locomotive Works in February 1941, differing from the T6 principally in the elimination of the hull side doors. Full production in 3 plants, all these initial production types being cast hull vehicles, designated M4A1. By the autumn of 1942, all other plants in the program were in full production, and in October 1942, at the Battle of Alamein, so towards the end, because Alamein really started kind of in August. So in October, what would that be? Supercharge, the counterattack. The first M4 mediums went into action with British forces. The M4 series was the most widely produced, most widely used, and most important of all tanks in service with American, British, and Allied forces in World War II. I thought I was going to tell me more about what types. Hold on a second here. Okay, just so you know, the 76 millimeter gun was introduced in production lines from February 1944. So if you're doing something before February 1944, you're not going to see any 76 millimeter gun Shermans. They're all going to be 75 millimeter guns. Late production types. Maybe this isn't the book that breaks down who has what. I have others. I have. Okay, here we go. British service. Issued to the British, the M4 medium tank was named General Sherman, more often called Sherman, but which name is properly known by other nations. The Sherman was in fact the most important tank in British service and more widely used than any British designed or British produced types from 43 to 45. British built tanks with comparable 75 millimeter dual purpose gun power, example the Cromwell 4 and Churchill 7, were not available for service until the end of 43 and not wide service until spring 44. The first Shermans almost all had the cast hull M4A1 variant, were shipped to the 8th Army in the Middle East in October 42. About 270 of the first batch of 300 were in service at the start of the Battle of El Alamein on October 24, 1942, where they supplemented the M3 medium Grants to make up almost half of the British tank strength of 1,100 vehicles committed into the battle. To make up for the numbers of M4 available, some of the vehicles had been withdrawn
from American armored units in the USA to replace vehicles lost by the sinking of one of the freighters convoying the initial batch to Massawa, which is in Eritrea, I think. Maybe it's in Ethiopia. So they went around and didn't run those through the middle of the Med. At the end of 42, also shipments of M4s started to Britain, and there was a steady flow of these vehicles to the British, both in Britain and the Middle East, from then until the war's end, all vehicles being supplied on a Lend-Lease basis. While numbers of all production variants were supplied to Britain, major deliveries were the M4A4 type, more than 1,600 supplied to 8th Army in Italy 1943. M4A2, M4, M4A1, and M4A3 in roughly that order of quantity. Very few M4A3s were sent since it was selected as the principal service type for the U.S. Army. So the U.S. Army was selected to have most of those M4A3s, so they didn't send them to the Brits. Very late production vehicles with HVSS suspension, 76mm guns, and wet stowage were not delivered until late 44, and then only in very small quantity of numbers, since most of these improved types went to the U.S. Army. Some of these late vehicles were used by the British, however. Yeah, well, they have the 17-pounder. That's a phenomenal weapon. Phenomenal weapon. So, M4A4s, yeah. And they called them, by the way, the Sherman 5. Sherman 5 was a British designation. Anyhow. 17-pounder gun will pretty much knock out any tank, pretty much. You might have problems with, the front of a Jagdtiger, but when are you going to encounter those? Yeah, 17-pounder is, if I remember, slightly better than the Panther gun. Slightly better. Ever so slightly. I bet that the Panther had better HE. And because the 76mm HE wasn't great for whatever reason. Like the Sherman 75 had a better HE round than the Sherman 76. Yeah, 17-pounder is going to knock out everything, You might have problems with the front of a King Tiger, but when are you going to encounter those? You could take on a Panther head on with a 17-pounder. Okay, well that's it for tonight. Almost 2 hours and a late start. So it looks like M4A4s will be used in Italy to go with my American tanks. M4A1 75 will be for Alamein. Yeah, you could use M4A1s also for Italy. Sicily. Nobody does Sicily. I've seen it. I've seen one game where somebody was using the Hermann Goering division with Panzer IIIMs or something like that. And, Okay, until next time, maybe we'll see you guys tomorrow night. If not, see you on Saturday morning. Have a good night, folks. Bye-bye.